The dungeon of Hyrule Castle Tower is just as much of a boring-ass, bland, beat-em-up romp of pointlessness as in Link to the Past, with no puzzles whatsoever to solve. Not even wall-fusing puzzles. If anything, it has less puzzles. At least you pushed a block and got keys from enemies in the original. And also has a much more tedious version of the second Ganon fight, because there's no way to tell, as far as I know, which Yuga is the real one. So I was just attacking whatever on a whim in a luck-based battle that took forever. When you hit a fake Yuga, it turns into one of those really annoying soldier enemies that all refuse to go down to the sword easy because your sword hits their own weapon. Which doesn't even make any sense because usually, like in real life at least, if a sword hits a sword, it'll generally end up breaking the swords. Swords aren't meant to block swords, that's what the shield is for. So that technique shouldn't even work for him. It wasn't fun. There's also some fortunately skippable cutscenes around here that waste your time with very predictable genericness and an overly long time of staring at Link's ugly model. Then Ganon and Yuga fuse together and get stopped by Princess Hilda for an actual twist. I love that she's called Hilda, by the way. Like in Sabrina the Teenage Witch, where there was Hilda and her opposite Zelda. Hilda's scene with Link is extremely boring and generic and predictable as well. Like, no duh, of course I had to find the crystals. Good thing it's skippable. And for some reason, Link is found passed out somewhere in Hyrule by the cranky evil twin of his mother figure, who brings him home for some reason to help him. It's interesting. They use a Dark World concept to make Hyrule basically the Moebius to Hyrule's Mobius, making it the evil dimension, where people are jerks. But ironically, it's a lot more fleshed out than Moebius because we actually get to see and interact with tons of inhabitants of this cynical, cruel world and see what a dump it really is. The problem is, aside from Ravio, they don't really have any good people here. Well, Hilda's a well-intentioned extremist who shows no foreshadowing whatsoever being anything but good until much later, but the point is, at least Moebius had the good Robotnik. With a world like Hyrule, I honestly don't care that much about saving it. It's nothing but a town full of thieves that have a let's become monsters cult. No one here is the least bit charming and sympathetic. Well, barely anyone anyways. At least in the Dark World you had the people be transformed into kooky creatures representing their true selves. At least in theory, as I'm not sure why the archery minigame guy and shovel minigame guy looked the way they did. And those minigame guys added some fun to the place. Hyrule is a lot more depressing, bleak, complete with arbitrary cracks everywhere on the earth to force you to switch between worlds constantly to progress in it. I have a question, why did nobody build any fences around the cracks in the earth to prevent toddlers or depressed people or sleepwalkers from falling to their dooms? If Hilda didn't even order that for the safety of her people, then maybe there's a reason her people stopped respecting the royalty. Also, Hilda's office is messy with some papers on the floor compared to Zelda's neat office. And Hilda has a chair thrown across the room, implying she actually has quite a temper. That's an interesting way to show their contrasting personalities. But it's also the only way that's used until the end, because when Hilda traps Ganon, she acts exactly like Zelda would for the rest of the game. And again, how did we get from Hilda's castle to unconscious in the blacksmith shop? And here we come to the giant step backwards. Instead of making the magic mirror better, improving on the concept by letting you use it from either world, they don't have a mirror at all, and instead force you to only transition between worlds by fusing with the wall and going through magical cracks for an overly long cutscene of transition. Much longer than just waiting a few seconds after entering a portal you yourself could have created. The reason they did this must have been that with the elevation, you can stand on top of any surface, update in technology, everything's a possible walkable surface. Meaning that if you could warp from one world to another, it might lead to being able to go out of bounds from being suddenly on top of a wall you shouldn't be on top of. I get that, but it's still a downgrade. The only upside to try to make up for that is that finally I can warp in the Dark World. About time. Though I still have to use save points finding them in order to do so. I see they still haven't fixed the problem of all the enemies dealing way too much damage there, and the game not starting out with full health when you reload a file. as an artificial excuse for padding, they force you to tell some thief 3 answers to song lyrics to get into a dungeon of all things. The answers are found by talking to the NPCs. The mini-games to get a piece of heart potentially from chests cost way too much to try to get right away. It's 200 rupees every time for a game of chance. And save scumming is more tedious in a game that shoves save points down your throat. It's just one, so whatever. The original got it right by making it cost just as much as a regular treasure game. Then after getting a piece of heart from a fat lady who seems to flirt with Link, or I guess she just has a motherly instinct towards him but doesn't really seem that way, Ravio tries to push on me some amazing inventory quick select controls with a tutorial that doesn't make it clear to me at all how to use it. I'm not sure if this qualifies as quick swap, but I do target items in the inventory and then press X or press Y on them. And again, buying the items is way too overpriced to try to do it right away. Even one item like the hammer costs 800 rupees, which is more money than you'll have at first. But rupee things are good, so. For some weird reason, Mother Maimai will only improve the items that you bought. Oh look, more modern Zelda padding. Because rather than simply letting you walk to the Palace of Darkness like in the original game, they force a fucking stealth section down your throat like it's Metal Gear Solid. Nobody likes stealth in Zelda. Why do they keep doing this? And it just makes it sting all the more that they refuse to have the invisibility item, the magic cape in this game, because that would have made the stealth a lot less nerve-wracking. So I'm not really gonna bother with doing the stealth right away. In fact, this caused me to put this dungeon to the very end of Hyrule. Why the hell does Sarsaparilla have to waste my time being a Captain Obvious in front of the crack near Link's house? You obviously already know what these cracks do, or you wouldn't have made it to him in the first place. He just wastes time saying, "Keep saving the world, dude." And the worst part is that he talks to you automatically, so you can't skip this. That doesn't scream a Link to the Past to me. There were a few times when characters talked to you automatically in that game. Ganon in front of Zelda, Prel when you brought Zelda to him in the Sanctuary, Zelda when you first meet her, and of course the Crystal Maidens do that. But notice that this never happens outside. It's always in a dungeon. Also, how did the children of Mother Maimai get all the way to Hyrule? You know, they pretty much have to have been trying to get that far away from her, especially with them all being so spread out all over the place. It's the most arbitrary collectathon side quest in all of Zelda, despite being the only fun one. At least Golden Skulltulas and Pose made sense. They're enemies, so they go all over the place. Maimai should still logically be with their mother. So I'm doing the water dungeon first in Hyrule. I like that they have all of the marsh where the water dungeon is on one screen without having to scroll the screen at all. But I don't like that, 1, it takes multiple seconds to activate a Girouette instead of just being able to press A at it and save with it right away. And most importantly, 2, more padding! Because modern Zelda creeps its ugly head once again, as I'm suddenly forced to go get the super bomb at this point in the game to blow up a boulder that's arbitrarily blocking the way to Swamp Palace. Even though the super bomb was only used to get the silver arrows and golden sword at the end of the original game. It would have felt just fine if they had the exact same padding as in the original game, where you went to the light world to drain the water in the equivalent to the dungeon, and then return to the dark world. Because that was a puzzle. And not just a puzzle, but the one time when the game properly took advantage of the parallel worlds mirroring each other concept, to have it so that your actions in one world actually changed the other world for once. Though that doesn't really make sense to me at all. If the Dark World was Hyrule in the future, then it makes sense that draining the water make the water drain in Hyrule too. But the fact that the water gets magically undrained just because you change screens makes that all the more confusing and unintuitive that the game would remember the water is drained after changing worlds, but being on the same screen. Wouldn't changing worlds count as a screen transition? But what prevented this from being unintuitive was that Sarsaparilla blatantly told you what to do in the dungeon to unlock it. And it was a lot more creative and charming than using the super bomb at the wrong part of the game to destroy an arbitrary boulder after paying for the privilege of playing a dungeon. It's bad enough that Dark Palace did that in the original. We don't need to repeat that mistake. And even worse, because at least a purple monkey man picking a lock was way more creative than blowing up a random boulder, which you do all the time in Zelda. I didn't mean to rant about this, it's just really weird and arbitrary that I have to travel all the way north and then come back here, avoiding the enemies littered all over the place. Before, it was a creative puzzle making use of the parallel worlds concept. Now the fact that they changed how you creatively enter the dungeon just makes the fact that it's modern Zelda dungeon padding all the more glaring, since they could have just let you enter the dungeon normally. Instead of being a place to drain the water for the other world too, the dungeon's light world equivalent is just one of those pointless rupee caves where you solve a really unintuitive puzzle for rupees. There's one treasure trove area where you land in a very specific way with cuckoos, but there's wind and stuff and it's frustrating. The existence of these caves isn't bad per se, but the fact that they're positioned in what used to be important key areas when they're totally pointless annoys me. Wow, the padding is even worse than I fucking thought. I forgot when writing this that instead of having the super bomb be sold at Ravio's old house like would be reasonable and was the case in the original, instead they drag it out even longer, forcing you to dodge even more enemies by having the super bomb be sold all the way at the south part of Thieves Town. And again, the damage caused by enemies in the Dark World is obnoxious. A full heart of damage from one blue moose. That's supposed to be like one of the weak soldier enemies. I actually got down to 2 hearts. This is all the more glaringly bad in design as a modern Zelda game. At least in Link to the Past, it was an old game and could be excused as they didn't know what they were doing. Here, they basically forced you to get the mail upgrades as fast as possible. Or mail upgrade, because the third one you don't get until the final dungeon. It feels like a bad ROM hack. I don't have many hearts at this point in the game. Oh, for fuck's sake, another stupid rupee mini dungeon in a key area. This time, where in the original there was a cave with a piece of heart south of the Flute Boy, in this game there's a completely worthless treasure cave where you use cuckoos and avoid wind gusts with your depth perception being difficult. I felt tricked into coming here. Also, the Flute Boy location, which was a charming part of the original game, has been replaced in Lowro with an infamously shitty baseball minigame. Don't play it. Damn it, I just want to get to the next dungeon and start enjoying myself again. Wow, they managed to make even the digging minigame an absolute piece of shit. Here's how. They pull the Peach's baking / potion making game from Paper Mario on you. Because for absolutely no reason, they forced you to manually keep track of how long you've been in the minigame instead of having a time limit on the screen. If you don't keep track of time just right, then they cheat you out of the rupees you rightfully earned. And you're not allowed to just warp away and keep the rupees either. You have to return to speak to the guy before the end of the time limit, or else he'll steal all the rupees you took. Worst of all, they have 2 digging minigames and they both times managed to screw it up. You'd think this was just a Lowrule thing, being scummy like that, but no, it's the same way in Hyrule. What was wrong with the original game's minigame? Why does everything about the overworld in this game have to suck? The minigames suck, there's padding in the way of the dungeons, the key areas you'd expect to have pieces of heart from Link to the Past are worthless treasure rooms forcing very tedious puzzles on you to get them. And all of it's in a Link to the Past map package, making a lot of it unintuitive. There has to be a problem when I'm only enjoying myself in the dungeons. I never had a problem with only enjoying myself in the dungeons in Link to the Past. Speaking of minigames, what have you done with my precious archery game? The best and one of the only good, if difficult, minigames in the original game, and it's gone here. Replaced with the Super Bomb salesman that should have been directly north of the second dungeon. I just want to go from dungeon to dungeon. What is wrong with that? At the very least, I can compliment the fact that when Irene is kidnapped, you don't have to deal with mashing A through her text boxes anymore, making the game a little faster paced as a result. But they still insist on having a text box to press A through when the empty room comes up to you, just so that the text box can have ellipses. Plus, you have to look up a guide to know which dungeon Irene is trapped in so that you could avoid saving her until later. Oh god, I thought it couldn't get any worse, but then I remembered just what kind of a person the Super Bomb salesman is. He's a fucking rapper. Holy shit. We're still relevant, damn it! How do we appeal to the kiddies these days? Well, John, how about forcing you to interact with the rapper who thinks he's cool, and force you to answer back to him and rap to progress with the game? Yeah, that's not an embarrassment to everyone involved. And it really speaks to how uncharming this character is that I completely forgot about him even after having played the game 3 times. It was completely unnecessary to make this character like this. His repetitive, stupid hand gestures and stance is cringeworthy. He just says yo over and over for no reason. And maybe it's just the French version, but he doesn't even rhyme, which makes making him a rapper fall even more flat because he's not rapping at all. Fuck whoever made this character and thought he was so clever. To make matters somehow even worse, there are multiple different times when you're encouraged to use a super bomb, like on a boulder just outside the shop that has a chest near it, or on the boulder blocking the entrance to the game's biggest rupee sink, a fairy fountain giving you a bottle after 10 billion units of throwing rupees in it, to the point where when I had the last dungeon in Low Roll left, I still didn't have that bottle because it didn't bother. And every time you use the bomb, you have to backtrack all the way back to the garden to get the super bomb again. The game then makes itself even worse than the original yet again, sheesh, it's like they're trying at this point, by making the super bomb twice as expensive as the originals, being 200 rupees, basically locking the dungeon behind a paywall. The only redeeming factor is that you only have to pay access for it once, which is good since you'll want to use the super bomb multiple times. Oh right, use it 4 times, because you need to use it just to get out of the garden with it to begin with. Also, the pathfinding AI of the bomb fucking sucks. It follows further behind you than the original. It's not really connected to your sprite with an invisible thread, and it's an actual solid object now. Because realism. This means that the super bomb can get stuck behind solid objects like the very fence you liberated it from, forcing you to go back to get it. This never fucking happened in the original game. All sorts of people and objects would follow you and they never got stuck behind things. In fact, they'd follow you through walls and across the water if you wanted, and none of them got hurt by any enemies. At no point did the followers actively change the way you moved, specifically because they wouldn't follow you if you walked normally. The chests didn't let you go into caves, big deal, you wouldn't do that anyways if you knew where to take it. That reminds me, the original game let me warp with the chest following behind me, and the chest would follow me when I warped, as unintuitive as that was. Not this game, because that would be too unrealistic. This game utterly misses the point of the original, what made it good in the first place, and this super bomb proves it. There was only one time a follower in Link to the Past was outright an inconvenience. Do you remember the old man that forced you to walk at a snail's pace even when you used the Pegasus boots? Well, the super bomb is like that, but dishonest about it. At least the old man makes sense since he's old and can't keep up with you. At first I thought using the Pegasus boots was fine. Then it turned out that the bomb doesn't keep up with you if you make a screen transition with it being too far behind you, because fuck convenience. In the original game, you flat out weren't allowed to use the boots with the bomb at all, because pressing A to use the Pegasus boots would place the bomb, and you then had a chance to make it not go through with blowing up by walking through it. Another thing this game doesn't do with the super bomb. This bomb actively inconveniences you by forbidding you from walking too fast and forcing you to walk taking into account. It changes your gameplay in an unfun way instead of just being there behind you. And it's absolutely mandatory to progress with the game. And look, I did want to have more than one thing to use the super bomb on in Link to the Past, but since you're forced to backtrack to get another one, instead of keeping them in an inventory or having multiple of them follow behind you at a time, there's a problem that makes it just tedious. Not to mention that now you or the enemies can make the bomb blow up by attacking it, when the bomb itself was invincible in Link to the Past. If you want any more proof that Link Between Worlds is inferior to Link to the Past in almost every single way, look no further than the Super Bomb side quest. Better dungeons doesn't make up for everything else. The overworld padding was once again enough that I wasn't motivated to play the dungeon the same day I finally unlocked it.